Hey guys, okay. I'm reporting on the urban myth, okay? Because I decided to call my channel this. The whole crazy thing, that was just a nickname I had actually in high school. So if you are wondering what that is, that was it. And I just, when I made up some of the channel names, they were somehow related to my past, or Some Girls is related to one of my favorite albums. Okay. So I'm going to skip around a little bit here. So if you want to have the chat with me, if you want to listen to this chat, um, I belong to a couple of different groups, and I don't believe that. I don't know. I'm having some difficulties trying to understand this new pope. I absolutely did not like the other one. As a matter of fact, I began to personally pray privately, and the acceptance of many of the things he added to the mass, I just refused to do. And it's been really hard for me, especially when I was with my family. Um, you know, my cousin came up to me and she was like, I just love her so much. Now she's older than me, and she actually was at my mom's wedding when she married my dad. Okay. So many of my cousins were, like four of them, maybe more. Um, my first cousins. And she was like, I had not seen her look so happy and so healthy, and such a long time. She had gone through some bad shit in her life, and whatever the case may be. Okay. But she always had a very pretty face, and um, many suitors, many boyfriends, things like that. Um, so she was so excited. She came up to me, oh my God, on the way here, they announced we have a new pope. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, well, some people liked Francis, some people didn't. But I feel like it's a sign that your mother is being buried. And I didn't know how to react to that. So, but I would, love to have discussions with her. But she seemed pretty, like we were talking about, perpetual Eucharistic adoration. And I mean, she just had discovered like a part of a pathway with her faith at the moment, with extreme fervor and happiness. And I'm happy for her. I mean, so if she's finding a great deal of joy out of this and participating in Eucharistic adoration, I think she switched churches. I think she used to teach at a Catholic church. I don't know what she's doing now. Okay. Or not church, I'm sorry, school. She's actually is a special education teacher and got a degree. She did quite a bit of education to teach and work with the deaf. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. So my mom, it was very strange. I talked to her on a Saturday, and she kept checking herself. I don't know how else to. She was very confused. She kept checking herself into the hospital, and every time she went in there, she would call, and because she was so confused. She had dementia, but they would not diagnose it because of her, number one, her insurance flow, and number two, her cash flow. And she was taken advantage of, and I knew this was happening. I was in the hospital a lot of that time, and or in my trial, my criminal trial. I'm still on the civil one, and for my accident, but I had been, laid up, and they kept pressuring her for a year to enter hospice, but she did not meet criteria. And then she went into, now this is all fairly recent, just within the last few months, she went into she left the hospital. I was still working on my trial stuff, and I wanted to live with her. I wanted to, get a 2-bedroom apartment and help her. And it would have been easy. I can do stuff like that. It's not that hard for me. And honestly, it's not that hard. But she began, dementia with agitation. And every time she went to a hospital, they were trying to pressure her. And she was very confused and forgetful. And every time she went in the last several months anyway, in 3 times, she just would call 911 every 10 days because I think she just wanted attention. Her blood work, her numbers, everything was fine. I hacked into her medical records. Well, I didn't really. I mean, I had all her after visit summaries, and I used the key code to get in to the My Chart thing. And I've read everything, and I actually recorded it. And because I didn't have time to download and print it out, so I just started my screen recorder, and I have like pages worth of SHIT. It also indicates that when this constant 911 calling began, which was in October of 2024, on September 1st of 2024, she got a high dose FLU Vaseline. 2 weeks later, it was every 2 weeks in the hospital. Then she was put on a new type of chemotherapy. She was on dexamethasone, fairly high dose, and another medication, another monoclonal antibody medication used in conjunction with the Velcade. The Velcade is a chemotherapy drug. And when I did research on that, and I had to go to an EU site, and the main side effects of it, it said that it affected more than 1 in 10 patients, and every side effect, I have to look for that, and I don't want to keep leaving, bouncing around here on the screen sharing. Every side effect she had. Okay. Okay, I've got to just pause this for one moment. I apologize. I just have to grab some water. Okay, so I'm back. I apologize for that. So I read her, her blood work indicated, so the last several times she had been in the hospital, my brother started getting really worried, and he started calling me. He said, they're trying to shove her into hospice. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And anyway, and I said, my Catholic faith is against hospice. And beside the point, what is she being admitted to hospice for? She had multiple myeloma, but everything was under control with that. Her numbers weren't bad. She was actually asymptomatic. She was old, but okay. She was 92, 91, 92 when all this shit was going down. I would say, it started when she was 92. Um, she would go into the hospital, but they would never help her, like, brush and floss her teeth, wash up, bathing, showering. So the biggest, when I looked at her blood work, the things that were flagged and stood out as abnormal were, her white blood cells, her leukocytes, and then honestly, she was diagnosed with a UTI several times, but it was never treated and it never cleared up. But that was it. Her lungs were good. She'd have CT scans taken. I mean, they took advantage and milked that insurance. And it was a company called Pro Healthcare out of Waukesha, Wisconsin. Just terrible. And I came in once and she was extremely hard of hearing, and I would say almost clinically deaf. So in order to communicate with her, you had to speak super loudly into one ear. So she was in bed and I went down to her ear, and she refused to, she had, like I said, dementia, and she refused to, she was sleeping, and then we came in and she's like, well, what are you walking like that for? And I said, well, Mom, it's my accident. And she's like, what are you talking about? And she never remembered I got into an accident. But the nursing staff kept saying, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with your mother. And they kept using the words, she is of her own mind. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? I mean, I didn't say it to the nurse. I said, what do you mean she's of her own mind? I said, she's extremely confused. She's not dealing with a full deck. She's been extremely confused for years. It's very bad. She doesn't remember anything. And I swear to God, after 5 p.m., you might as well just forget it to even have a conversation. She slurs her words. She doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't remember anything. I mean, her daughter was run over by a truck and she didn't remember that. And that was, 2 years ago. She didn't remember short term or long term. And, and she had episodes of yelling, screaming, throwing things only around me, which was weird. Rather just abusive, kind of nasty behavior. And then the next minute she'd call you up and she'd be like, hey, and I started recording the conversations. And she'd be like, oh, and she'd call me at 2:30 in the morning. Hey, I figured you'd still be up. I need to do, and then she didn't want to be in hospice. And I said, they're trying to kill you off out there. She's like, oh my God, no. I said, yeah. She's like, well, I don't want that. I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured that. So I sent a letter to, I sent them basically the context of the conversation I had on the phone with her. And it was almost like they were disappointed and mad. And they wanted to keep having, quote, family meetings. I said, I'm not going to a family meeting. They are not my family. And then they'll stick like 5 so-called medical professionals in there. And then they'll be totally bummed out because they're not going to get their little credit or their little commission or their little perk or their little gold star, because everything is done off of an algorithm. And they are trying to kill off the elderly population. This is exactly, it's like, oh, this woman comes to the hospital frequently. Yes, she's been diagnosed with cancer, actually in 2021, but they had mischarted it as 2023, but she was asymptomatic. She didn't have the normal types of symptoms that were in end stages of that disease, which would be, super low red blood cell count, anemia. I mean, she was slightly anemic, but nothing even flaggable on her blood work. but she kept flagging for an infection. And then they do a urine sample, and it was in her urine. And I kept saying, what are you doing to help my mom? And the doctors would call us up. It'd be a different doctor every time she'd be admitted. And they'd say, we have no reason to keep your mother here. She keeps coming into the ER, but there's nothing wrong with her. And by the way, have you had a dementia workup? This woman doesn't know what's going on. And I'm like, I know. Can you help us? Then they'd put her on a floor, and the nurses and the social workers and the psychologists, they'd come at her and just, and do massive brainwashing techniques on her. And she said, she left me a voicemail. They told me I'm dying. They told me I have no hope. They told me this is the only option I have left. They told me. And she kept saying, referring to they. Now I've got that voicemail message, and I recorded that and also put that up on a video that I have saved on private. Let's make sure the mic is on here, huh? And what they are doing to the elderly is criminal. And this is exactly what Sarah Palin spoke of, and everybody made fun of her, and death panels. Well, once you put all the computers and hook everything up, they have algorithms, and they punch in algorithms, and what happens? They diagnose a patient or determine if a patient should basically still be on this planet or not based on algorithms. So then all of a sudden they're like, well, she's dying of malnutrition. I'm like, she's not dying of malnutrition. She had like 3 grocery lists in we put her in another assisted living place, and she had all this food that she wanted. She wanted grapefruit. She wanted this. She wanted that. She wanted my brother to get her some crap at some local grocery store where she could heat it up in the microwave. She wanted grapefruit juice and grapefruit because she said now, she was off blood pressure meds. She didn't have anything else going on except, again, for a UTI that was constantly being left untreated. I would call up there and I would say, what is going on with my mom? And they just wouldn't help me. I said, did you get her up and take her to the bathroom? Did you get her up and help her wash up? How is she doing? What? Yes. I'm like, what do you mean, yes? Yes. Is it charted? Yes, it is charted. I'm like, I knew it wasn't, and it was the same nurse all the time. Her name was Lindsay. I won't say her last name, but I know it. And this woman, she was out for blood. And these people are going to hell. So then she gets out of the hospital. She leaves me this horrible voicemail message that scared the living shit out of me. And I'm like, Mom. And every time I would try to talk to her over the phone, she would simply hang up on me. Then they talked her into cutting off contact with her kids. And the nurses would say, your mother doesn't want you. She doesn't want to talk to you. She doesn't want to see you. She did the same thing to my brother. And we're like, oh my God. And then after they got her into hospice and started injecting her with morphine, oh, she'll see you now. I'm like, wait a minute. What is going on? Why is she in hospice? And what doctor signed off? Well, he did it over the phone. So a doctor that never met my mom, knew nothing about her medical records, never went over her anything to do with her, didn't realize that she had severe dementia and a UTI, a relatively advanced dementia. I mean, over the phone on a checklist. Well, what was on the checklist? Dehydration and malnutrition. I said, malnutrition? I said, I was just in her room with an aide, well, whoever she was. She wasn't even on any medications for health conditions. Her vitals were normal. Her respiration, pulse, BP, temperature. And I'm like, what are you guys doing there? And I had just ordered her a case of water from Amazon. I said, could you just be a doll and open the box and put the water in the fridge, or at least there are straws in a drawer here. I told her where they were. And when I came in, there were a bunch of pillows on top of the box of water, and it was just sitting there unopened. Like, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? So she gets back to this assisted living place from the hospital. She's like, oh, I'd like to have my hair done. So she gets her hair done, and then they administer a dose of morphine, put her into bed, and administer morphine. I said, I only give her the morphine if she says she's in pain. Don't just routinely start giving it to her. And it was a relatively low dose, but I don't know what they were doing, because they weren't even RNs. They weren't even certified nursing assistants. They weren't LPNs. They were caregivers that were hired off the street, trained in administering medications and recording what they gave. I don't know what they did, and they were giving it to her in liquid form. I don't even know if these people even knew how to measure. There was a note in her room saying laundry to be done Wednesday, but they spelled Wednesday, Wenday. They left the S out because I don't believe they knew how to spell the day of the week. I really don't. Because it said Monday I came in, oh my God. And then I was talking to a nurse, and mom was in bed, and I heard her say, I'd like to get up to go to the bathroom. And they said, no, I could hear the aides say, no, you can't go. We can't take you. You might fall. And she said, I want to go to the bathroom. No, you cannot. You go in bed. I heard them. And I said, if she wants to go to the toilet, take her to the toilet. I said, she's got a wheelchair there. Put her on the edge of the bed. She wants to go. She wants to get up. Sit her up. Take your time in doing it so she doesn't get dizzy. Sit her. When I was in the hospital with my pelvic fracture, they sat you on the side of the bed. They said, okay, now sit there and count to 10. Then stand up and count to 10. Or just put a bedside commode there and simply have them sit on the bed and transfer them to the commode. That's nursing 101, for fuck's sake. They refused to do anything. Then we had them set up with an electronic deposit or withdrawal for her room on a monthly basis. Well, she passed away at the end of April, but they went in there, and it was supposed to be, I believe, $6,800, and I negotiated a rate with them, and they went in on May 1st, even though we had it set up. I was there with my brother. We had it set up for the 5th, not the 1st. But on the 1st, even though she was dead and we cleared everything out, they withdrew $8,900. And they never told us that they were doing that. But they were charging her for full skilled nursing, but the facility was not a full skilled nursing facility. These people are in trouble. Then, so this doctor over the phone goes on an algorithmic checklist, okay? And and just makes something up, signs off on it. I don't even know what state he was in. I don't even think he was in the state of Wisconsin. Then started drugging her up, and then she died. So we took some money and we hired a private doctor to do a detailed autopsy and toxicology, and then to prove that she had dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. And I don't want this to gross people out. We did have her brain. It's being worked on. They did brain tissue samples and is being studied right now at Mayo Clinic in their lab. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but I have to take a stand now. You know, I can't let this happen to any more people. Then this place has several different lawsuits against it, and they were all the nurse that evaluates the patient says, yeah, she can do everything herself, except she needs help pulling her pants up and putting her shoes on. She gets there and she needed much more help. I was there. I used to be, I was in nursing school and I was a nurse's aide and a home health aide. So when I came there, I did everything. I would stand her up. I knew how to do that. I would walk her around. I would take her to the bathroom. I tried to give her a shower, okay, because she called me up and she's like, I want you to force me and we're going to do it. And how I got her to do it would be, we did it in baby steps. My brother went out and bought an expensive chair for her that had a control to sit her up, okay? And he paid like $1,000 for it, and it's microfiber. And so we'd get her to the position where she, where her feet were flat on the floor. And then I'd say, well, let's wait. And I sat next to her and it took another 10 minutes and she said, okay, let's go. So I get her into the shower. There was a heater in there. I turned the heater on so she wouldn't get cold. I had all her clothes off. I turned the water on and it's cold. And then I said, well, it might take time to heat up. And I waited 10 minutes and she's sitting there with no clothes on. But like I said, I had the heater on and it was warm enough. And I said, well, guess what? There isn't any hot water. And she's like, oh my God. So I found like a large plastic cup in the kitchen and I had to go from the bathroom sink to the shower chair in the shower and dump water on her to wash her hair and to wash her body. Almost like if you were out camping or something. I don't know how, I don't know. Or if your water went out in your house or something. It was just, I was in disbelief. And then it took them 2 days to fix it. And I said, I want a phone call when that water is fixed. I want you to tell me, yes, this has been taken care of. They never called me. They set up care conferences over the phone. They never would call us or do anything. Then they got their big fat commission and they OD'd her on morphine. And she died. And I said, we sat down. My brother had her moved to one funeral home. And I said, no. And I said, move her body. I don't want her there. And he got mad at me. And I said, well, can we just please do it? And he's like, yeah, okay. I said, because we worked with my dad for some reason, because my mom doesn't understand. She didn't understand or hear anything. Hold on a minute. And so we moved her, and they did a fantastic job. It was just unbelievably good. I mean, they were so professional, and everything was just like more and above what you could even ever imagine. But when we got in there to clean her room up after they moved her, I mean, we couldn't even get there in time. Her vitals were normal. This is what I don't understand. And she had no signs, and all of a sudden, okay, they must have, I think they gave her lethal dose. I sincerely do. And when we got there, the room looked, I had cleaned the room. I set the room up. She'd only been there 3.5 weeks. But I had gone in there and I cleaned every time I went in there. But every time I went in there, they watched me like a hawk. They thought that they just didn't want me there helping my mom. They wanted her to die. It was really crazy. They kept interrupting with weird stuff. Do you want your daughter to wash your hair? I want you to tell me if you want her to do it. My mom was like, yeah. Are you sure? Do you want your daughter? And then my mom asked me to put rollers in her hair and said it. Do you really want your daughter to put rollers in your hair? You guys, this was so then I'd have to go in every other day because they were abusive and they were bullying me. And they never left me alone with her. They just kept on it. And I just felt as though, and I'm not one to kind of give up, but here I'm on crutches too. And I'm walking all over parking lots, down hallways and stuff like that. And I'd come in there, the place would be a mess. Well, after she passed away, you wouldn't believe the mess they left behind. They basically left everything in piles. I found dirty clothes, wet, and crap laying in the bathroom on the shower chair. I found that twice. And I took pictures of everything. But I think the worst part of all, and this is going to freak you guys out, is the funeral home that came and got her she had a sheet with a blanket over her, and her bedspread was set off to the side. And the sheet, the blanket was on top of the sheet. You know how you make a bed. And they took the sheet and the blanket and they rolled the blanket up inside the sheet, and it was on the floor when we came in. Not just a little bit on the floor. I mean, it was in a ball on the floor. And the pillows, like they used like the good pillow shams, and I had everything set up and everything was like dirty. And the bed was just laying there open with, chucks or with like a diaper sheet or whatever on it. And then they put a sympathy card on top of that. And I went, this is a nightmare. So I took pictures of everything. And I thought, this is gross. This is not professional. This is like violation after code violation after code violation. And for me to have to go through this, I just don't want anyone else to ever have to go through this again. But it's happening. And then you hear stories from people. It is very wrong that hospices are being promoted on this thread. Hastening death against the wishes of the patient is very common. This is condemned by the Catholic Church. So, but they definitely used brainwashing techniques on her. I mean, I sent her Easter lily in the hospital. I typed it overnight and they lost it. And then I said, you guys have to deliver it to that hospital. I want my mom to have that. And she called me in the morning and she was thanking me. And she said, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Oh, I just love, and I had a special card written. And she said, well, I'm going to order dinner now. And, I really like the food here and blah, blah, blah. And then the next day she calls me to say that the hospital told her there was no hope, that she was dying and had no other choice but to just allow them to put her into hospice and die. And there was nothing more that could be done for her. And this was the end of her life. And that was it. Now, and I have the voicemail. What kind, and she left me this on a voicemail. What kind of a fucking hospital? And then they made her cut off contact with her kids. What kind of evil demons? And I told her, I said, I don't want you at that hospital. So she called 911 twice in 3 weeks. The first time she called, when we put her into the new facility, because I wanted to get her away from the demonic forces coming out of this pro healthcare company, which is in part owned by United Health. And the social worker called me up and she said, the only thing that your mom is doing is complaining about the coffee we gave her. We have no reason to keep her here. There's nothing wrong with her, but you need to get help because the woman has dementia. Then the doctor gets on the phone. Same thing. She said, we have to get her out of the ER because there's no reason for her to be here. And they had her so convinced that I was like, I would ask them questions. When I went to visit her, like I said, I'd be like in her ear talking to her. What are you doing to your mother? I said, nothing. I was trying to gently roll her onto her back. And she took both of her fists and punched me. And she was really strong. Because, like I said, the woman was, I say off her rocker. What I mean is she had dementia. She wasn't, they kept saying she's of her own mind. Well, what the hell does that mean? There's nothing wrong with her. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's such a sweet lady. You die now, honey. And they'd coddle her and do this to her. And she's, oh, yes, that's right. I'm dying. I've got to go. And then the next day she'd call me up and she'd say, I'm fine. I'm ready to go. But they finally got her, and I told her not to sign a DNR, and they finally got her to sign that DNR, and they went nuts. And then they got her to cut off contact with her children, which was the most hurtful, evil fucking thing on the planet. So Catholic nurse recounts hospice horror, says doctor euthanized a priest. Wow. The public still does not realize that Terry was taken from us to fulfill a hospice euthanasia partnership. Oh, they're talking about Terry Schiavo here. Agenda as an in-your-face demonstration of what they can do, are doing, and will do to others. In recent days, Panzer received a following edited email from a registered nurse and Indonesian Wendy Ludwig, who recounts the horror in witnessing that's a person from Illinois, the euthanizing of an elderly Catholic priest. I'm so upset, horrified, and angry about this in my area. The hospice went on an advertising campaign, writing articles in the local newspaper, handing out flyers to doctors' offices, and trying to drum up support for local clergy by going around to each church asking to set up a meeting with them so they can explain the benefits of hospice. It's truly terrible where I live. It's not uncommon to see a patient eating in a restaurant with his or her family one week and the following week be dead after hospice comes in. When my mother was ill, she made absolutely clear that she did not want hospice anywhere near her, yet the hospital did many tactics to hasten her death and ended up doing as they pleased, coming up with some strange medical power of attorney that no one had seen before. It was truly awful. For the rest of my life, it will affect me, and there is never a day that I do not think about it. I did everything I possibly could, but they still found ways to not treat infections, to deny her enough fluid, and to do so many things. And it did not matter what I said or did, or what she said for that matter. I'm currently seeking a new career because as a pro-life Catholic, I cannot be in good conscience. I could not work in hospitals anymore. Even the Catholic hospitals support hospice in one way or another. I can tell you honestly that I'm not aware of any hospice that is good. Everyone I know who has gone to a hospice in any state that I know of has been, then it says it's so overwhelming. It's so unbelievable is the way that a hospice can convince people they are doing good and mercy for their loved ones. And I wouldn't go to those meetings. I said to my brother, I said, I'm not going. I said, tell them we're not doing it. Tell them I won't be there. Then they came up with here. I love this one. Here I am on crutches in this little teeny isolated room. Oh yeah, my mom called me at like 4:00 in the morning. She said she didn't know where she was. She thought she was in an apartment, at her apartment. I said, no, you're in the hospital. She said, what? I'm in the hospital? No, I'm not. And I said, it's okay, Mom. You're just confused. It's no big deal. I was just happy to hear her voice. And she was cheerful. Everything's fine. Oh, I didn't know I was in the hospital. This is all within like the last month, you guys. And they did all these tactics and they tried to brainwash my brother. And I said, you can go. I'm not. They tried to do this with my dad too. I'm like, no. I said, a family meeting. I said, forget it. I'm not showing up. I'm not doing that. What is that going to be for? And they come up with some big speech, and my brother would say, yeah, I don't think so. So then what they did was they just said, well, you can't see your kids anymore. And if your daughter comes in here, we're going to arrest her. I'm like, why? I said, arrest me for what? I didn't do anything. And they made up some, I don't know what the reason was, because they said that I was rude to staff. Well, no, the staff came in and started going up to my mom and I said, I'm leaving. And it was such a big space that I took my crutches, got into a wheelchair, and I left. I didn't even ask them any questions. I just said, she's not dying. She's okay. Just she's okay. And then, a couple hours later, she calls me up. She's like, hey, I knew you'd still be up. I needed to talk to you. As far as I'm concerned, my mom was basically taking a nap. And I'm not kidding, because she always sleeps in the afternoon. So I don't know. They can convince people they're doing good. They take the family at their most vulnerable time, convince them the only way the patient won't suffer is by using hospice. She wasn't even suffering, except for she was being neglected with a UTI. She was not allowed to use the toilet. She was denied use of the toilet because they said, well, you're taking, 2.5 milligrams of morphine and you might fall. Well, You're there so the patient doesn't fall. You simply do a transfer to the wheelchair, to the bed. If you haven't been trained to do that, that's not a nursing facility. But then they pronounced her dead over the phone. What was the cause of death? Malnutrition. I'm like, malnutrition? Malnutrition, there would be, definite blood work signs of that, or scans or tests. So that's why we're doing the autopsy, and it's troubling. It's troubling because she wasn't in end life phases, but somehow something happened to her based on medical data, extensive medical data and testing. This is what I can't figure out. So I'll let you guys know what happens. Maybe I'm wrong, but since she was told to cut off contact with her family at that point, really, because they said, well, if you even, you leave her, we're going to arrest you. I'm like, arrest me? Oh, you got to be kidding. Where is this coming from? What would be the charges? And P.S., I'm on crutches, and it's just like, and I'm using a wheelchair, and what the hell am I going to? Oh, one of the nurses said that I threw something around the room. I said, threw something around the room? What specifically did I throw around the room? They actually made shit up. I mean, I didn't throw anything around the room. There wasn't even anything there for me to throw. And what would I be throwing? Oh, I know. I dropped my crutch. I know that. And I picked, I stood up, and, I had the crutches, and I was in the wheelchair, and one of the crutches fell, and I put it back. I'm a mature woman. But then they just started making things up. They said, well, your sister can't come here. We're going to arrest her because she threw something in the room. I said, I'm telling you guys, they made that up. What the hell would I be throwing in a room? What they do with these rooms now is every room is private. They are so small and so tiny. I had relatively decent sized rooms where I was. They weren't that big, but they weren't like these little closets the size of a damn walk-in closet. What the hell am I going to throw? I was having a conversation. This is unbelievable. Just people making shit up. So thanks for listening. Oh, here's a good one. I witnessed a doctor euthanizing a Catholic priest who stated in no uncertain terms that he did not want hospice. The priest did not have cancer or any other terminal illness. He was 94, still saying Mass, and very active. When the priest needed knee surgery for an injury to his knee, the doctor decided it was time to call in hospice. I want you to think about this. The priest adamantly and angrily refused, so the doctor took his medicine away and started to give him pain pills, even though the priest said he was not in pain. So when he said took his medicine away, I'm assuming that meant like blood pressure meds or something. In my mom's case, they took the antibiotics away. The priest was in a nursing home following his knee injury and was getting physical therapy. He needed to go to the hospital. While in the hospital, the doctor refused him food and fluids. And that's another thing. I asked the girl, I said, would you just please, out of the goodness of your heart, run to the fridge. I know there are bottles of water in there, and take a straw, and just, my mom will take a sip. And everything was exactly how I left it, as far as like the water in the fridge. I knew exactly how many bottles were left. The case was unopened. They just let her lay there. They gave her doses of pain meds and let her croak. A short time later, the nurse came in and got the family, but told me to stay in the waiting room. I had a terrible feeling. I went to the nurse's station. When the curtain was pulled in Father's room, I heard a priest saying prayers over him, the family room as well. Was told not to go in. Yeah, they won't even let you go in. They won't let you near the person while they're killing them off. I stood outside and heard the nurse telling the family that they were giving him another dose of medicine and taking off his oxygen. I was told to go back to the waiting room. I knew it was happening. The doctor had viciously called me to sit in the waiting room while he euthanized the priest. I left the hospital, and before I got home, I received a call that the priest had passed away. The doctor still practices at the hospital. I have many other horror stories. Boy. Wow. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now, and I'll pick up on this. Oops, I'm sorry. I took the wrong one. Oops. Let's close that out. And sorry, guys.